Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl. Welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. Today we're diving into a topic that sits right at the intersection between resilience, well-being, and compassionate living: psychological flexibility. Why do some people bend with the winds of life while others feel like they might just break? And how does self-compassion help us meet life's pressures, especially the ones we quietly carry inside, with courage rather than criticism? These are big questions, and today we have someone uniquely placed to explore all this with us. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Professor Ross G. White. Ross is a clinical psychologist, researcher, and author of The Tree That Bends: How a Flexible Mind Can Help You Thrive. His work brings together the science of thriving, the realities of high performance cultures, and the profound value of being able to stay open, grounded, and connected when life gets difficult. Ross has spent his career helping people, from elite performers to everyday humans, cultivate the kind of inner flexibility that supports not just coping, but genuine flourishing. In our conversation, Ross and I explore the paradox of high achievement, its rewards, its hidden costs, and what happens when our drive to succeed starts to shape our identity. We unpack the acronym AWE: anchored, willing, empowered. And we walk through the central ideas of the tree that bends, including how various practices can transform the way we move through the world. And towards the end, we venture into a topic that's close to my heart: men, masculinity, psychological flexibility, and compassion, and how shifting these narratives might help men lead fuller, kinder, and more connected lives. And so I bring you Professor Ross G. White. Professor Ross White, welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you for the invite, Stan. Great to have the opportunity to talk.
It's wonderful to speak with you, and I wondered whether we could start actually with your book. So, The Tree That Bends, Chapter 1, you explore the idea that high performance often comes with a high price. And that
Mhm.
might be in sports or arts or maybe even in daily life, I suppose. From your perspective, what are some of these costs or even hidden costs that people tend to overlook maybe and but maybe what are the genuine benefits as well that keep us striving so hard?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the cultures in which we live in are meritocracies. There's certainly something about hard work being rewarded and outcomes being held up as being particularly important achievements. And we do have that urge to strive, and that's important, as you mentioned, in various domains of our lives, whether it be professionally, in our family lives, in our free time. If we've got objectives that we're working towards and we have a sense of achieving those, that feels good for us. And we certainly get plaudits for that. And yeah, workplaces, for example, will reinforce particular types of traits. So perfectionism can be a good thing for organizations in the sense that the work is delivered to a very high standard. Obsessiveness can also be reinforced and rewarded because there is that sense that people are keeping their shoulder to the wheel and really having that attention to detail. But of course, too much obsessiveness, too much perfectionism isn't good for us as individuals. And there's almost been this messaging, and I guess it could be charted back really to some of those ideas around, well, if you're not living life on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And the
Oh,
1990s no fear t-shirts were massive and they had these slogans emblazoned all over them. And yeah, that idea of, well, if you're not performing, you're not cutting it, and you really need to be attentive to your performance. And this sense that you have to sacrifice your well-being at the altar of success. And I'm really troubled by that idea that that's a zero-sum game, that you have to sacrifice your well-being in order to achieve or succeed. So the book was really an attempt to try to redress the imbalance there and to highlight that it's not a zero-sum game. We can excel and we can feel well. And I thought psychological flexibility was a great vehicle for helping people to do that.
I've heard you say before, the problem of relentless, relentless, relentlessness,
Yes.
or something, but also maybe perfectionism, or something, that there's a threshold there somewhere,
Yeah.
that's certain striving and having high standards, maybe even, or having goals that we're really working towards, aspirations that we want to achieve,
Mm.
that works well in a whole range of contexts, but somewhere there's a kind of threshold, and when we cross that, it starts
Mhm.
to affect our well-being.
Well, that's right. And there are different forms of perfectionism. And the particularly problematic one is the maladaptive perfectionism, where it moves from that perfectionistic striving, if you like, to tilt more into this maladaptive preoccupation with needing things to be absolutely perfect. And that can actually slow our progress towards the completion of goals. And I'm sure listeners will be aware of that perfectionistic voice that they might struggle with at times can really slow them down and make them hypercritical of the work that they've been producing to the point that they start to get reluctant to submit it. And that does slow things down, obviously. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with tenacity. There's nothing wrong with grit. There's nothing wrong with relentlessness. They have their place in particular contexts. But if they start to become overused strategies and the only tool in the toolbox, yeah, being relentlessly relentless will lead to burnout. And we're seeing levels of burnout, Stan, rising. The hope was that COVID might be the great reset and that it would help us reflect a bit more on our patterns of working and might help to bring more balance and blend between work and life. But if anything, we're now working longer hours than we did before the COVID pandemic. And yeah, the rates of burnout are rising.
The maladaptive perfectionism and really shame-based self-criticism are such close cousins, aren't they, sometimes? And
Yeah.
that's where it really, the sort of the rubber hits the road, and our well-being starts to suffer.
Yeah, and shame and guilt, some of those self-conscious emotions, they're very challenging to deal with, and unless we have techniques and strategies and scaffolds in place to help us manage the impact of shame and feelings of guilt, then that can lead to problems in the longer run, particularly around mental health and well-being.
Mm. You've mentioned psychological flexibility there, and I guess the book brings that in as a kind of a framework. Um, how do you see flexibility really helping people navigate this tension between aspirations and achievement, and balancing well-being? I sometimes see, on the social medias, suggestions to go gently with oneself, or to, to lean into really taking care and time, and to sort of backing away, I guess, in some ways, from aspirations as a kind of a means of self-care. But I suppose, yeah, is there a way where psychological flexibility really helps us to navigate those two equally important things, achievement and well-being?
Great. Yeah, in the book, I talk about this idea of strong intention, light attachment. And forever grateful to a psychologist colleague of mine, Jennifer Nardosi, who introduced me to that term as we were sat in Sierra Leone doing some work around cross-cultural mental health for a charity called Commit and Act a number of years ago. But strong intention, light attachment is this idea of, well, be strong in your intention to be true to what it is that matters to you, but be light in getting attached to the notion that there's one particular way to do that. And I think if we can hold in mind, and listeners can hold in mind, this idea of strong intention, light attachment, that allows us maybe to carry ourselves lightly, that it allows us to recognize that there are things that matter, when it comes to the things that matter to you, that's a journey. And there are different paths to our sense of purpose, not one single path. So I hope that that allows us some wiggle room to carry ourselves a bit more lightly. And for the listeners, I think it's helpful just to give them a sense of what psychological flexibility is, because it's a concept I talk a lot about in the book. So psychological flexibility is the ability to be true to what it is that's important to us, even though difficult thoughts and feelings may show up in pursuit of those things that matter to us. It's essentially about changing the relationship we have with the thoughts and feelings that we can face on a daily basis so that they don't dictate to us. The way I like to describe psychological flexibility for people is it's the idea that we have thoughts and feelings. Those thoughts and feelings don't have us. So we can live our life with thoughts and feelings rather than having to um, live through those thoughts and feelings. So living with thoughts and feelings as opposed to living through them.
Mm.
And that can often be the case. The thoughts we have about ourselves, the thoughts we have about other people, it's almost like a lens through which we start to perceive the world. So that's that idea of living through our thoughts. And yeah, psychological flexibility is about recognizing the stories that our mind might generate about who we are and being open and willing to show up to the emotions that can come with those stories, to be clear on what it is that matters to us in life, and to try to stay present as we move towards what it is that matters to us, bringing those thoughts and feelings along the road with us rather than being blocked by them.
Just a question that's popped to mind. Could you give an example of a sort of a scenario, I suppose, that demonstrates psychological inflexibility, and what that same scenario might, how that might play out with more psychological flexibility?
Yeah, great. So whenever I was writing The Tree That Bends, there were a lot of thoughts in my mind about, am I going to be able to contribute anything novel, interesting, engaging that people might want to read? And there were a lot of concerns about other books that were out there, people I respect and really admire for the style of writing that they have adopted. So I'm going to name check some people here, right? Because I think that's important. Russ Harris, Australian act practitioner and trainer. The Happiness Trap, great book, great book. I'm also thinking here about the like of James Clear and Atomic Habits. Just a beautiful book in terms of the way the messages are explained and how it builds and the practical utility, the stuff people can take away and use in everyday life. So it would be easy for me to be very daunted and feeling that I'm just not cut out for that and to question my own capabilities and competencies around contributing something helpful and interesting. So yeah, there were times in that process of getting the idea together for the book that the inflexibility did show up. Those narratives about, well, who are you to think that you could contribute something new and interesting and engaging? And the inflexibility piece would have me being really kowtowed by those stories my mind was generating, the emotions, the fear, the sense of worry that might show up about, oh, if you were to do that and it didn't land well with people, or you stepped on somebody's toes by not describing a concept particularly well. Yeah, that sort of fear, worry could have shut me down, but it would have led to me living life small. It would have cut me off from something I'm very passionate about explaining psychological concepts in plain language, helping to cascade that knowledge down to a general readership. Like Stan,
Mm.
for 17 years, I've been writing academic papers for academic journals, which is great and important for developing the science, but it's not really getting the message out in the way that I want to. So I want to engage with the public. So the flexibility piece is Ross, recognize that this is important, that perhaps it's important enough for you to have those doubts, those concerns, those fears, and those anxieties. You're going to have that in life anyway. Why not have it doing something that really matters to you, that you think is going to make a difference for other people? So inflexibility, yeah, okay, I'll shut this down, I'll close the laptop and I'll move on, versus the, hey, take a deep breath, let's get grounded, let's be open and explore those emotions and how they're showing up for me in this moment. Where is the fear? Where is the anxiety? It's in the tummy. It's like butterflies, right? Can't
Yeah.
stop the butterflies, but I can help them fly in formation. And then let's move forward, committing to taking the actions I need to do to write the book.
You can hear the seesaw of intention and attachment.
Yeah.
That it with where when there's the psychological inflexibility, it's kind of that it sort of lightens intention and strong attachment,
Yeah.
whereas the psychological flexibility and the seesaw shifts. Now we're strengthening that sense of intention and the things that are driving that, and just start to hold a bit more lightly to both the path but also the outcome. And the psychological flexibility says, well, maybe this, or it could be this, or let's see that, or it just sort of opens up really the possibilities.
Exactly that. And the attack, yeah, you allude to this idea, which is important, about the risk of becoming too attached. So as I commit to take that valued action about writing the book, there were certainly times during that process where I could see it was taking a lot off me. It was a greedy process. And yeah, being able to remind myself strong intention, light attachment, step back as well. And bizarrely, whenever you step back, you get greater clarity. I talk about some of the sentences in that book felt like a life sentence, literally,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
because it took so long, like the minute focus on a particular line. And I could sit for half an hour looking, the cursor on the computer being a blinking alert to the fact I wasn't making progress, right? And when I actually got up and took the dog for a walk, as I walked along, the answer would come, the clarity would come, right? As
Mm.
I stepped away, sometimes that's whenever the clarity came. So yeah, strong intention, light attachment, hold things lightly too. Don't get too drawn in because it will, I think, drain you.
Mm.
That's the risk.
I mean, Russ Harris is a tough one to have as a comparison. I think, doesn't his,
Mhm.
I think on the front of his book it says, over 1 million copies sold or something. And so his book is very, very, very successful and effective as well.
Mhm.
But that's what the mind does. It creates these comparisons that can be very,
Yeah.
very difficult.
And just to say, Stan, I'm grateful for us because I did share a copy of the book with him before it went to print, and he was kind enough to provide an endorsement for the book, which was lovely. And he wrote me a lovely email, and it was just really nice to know somebody that you'd admired had read the material and thought a lot about it and had some lovely warm words. So yeah, grateful to
Mm,
us.
yeah. And the book is really, that's your voice, isn't it? And your take and your sort of integration of different things, and wanting to present that, I suppose, to the reader as something that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Actually, chapter 3, anchored, I suppose. So that's where you start to move into the tin tacks of it all, and
Yeah.
it really emphasizes values as that anchoring, stabilizing force. So how do you help people discover what really anchors them, or perhaps even rather than what they've just been conditioned to value, or what
Yeah.
society has kind of suggested to them?
Yeah, it's a great point. And just for the listener, in the book, I use the anatomy and functioning of a tree as a central metaphor, hence the tree that bends. So it's from a Tanzanian proverb, the tree that bends does not break, or the wind does not break the tree that bends.
Mm,
So the tree was a very central metaphor, and I use the anatomy of a tree to represent three important components of psychological flexibility. And we're starting with being anchored, which
Mm.
is the roots of the tree, right, which keep it grounded. But then the trunk of the tree represents the second element of a flexible mind, being willing, if you like, to lean into the storms of life, willing to be open to the emotions that show up at difficult times. And then finally, the crown of the tree, the branches and the leaves, represent the being empowered element of psychological flexibility. So the crown of the tree is the powerhouse of the tree. That's where photosynthesis happens. That's where the tree creates the fuel it needs to grow and to develop. Likewise, we need to be empowered by our sense of purpose and our personal values so that we can take pragmatic action in line with our purpose and our values. So yes, the roots, the trunk, the crown, anchored, willing, empowered, and that's represented by the acronym AW, just to help people remember it. Anchored,
Mm.
willing, empowered represent those three components. So, listeners, if you're interested in psychological flexibility, the book will be helpful. But if you're also interested in trees, you're going to learn a lot about trees as well. So,
And
being anchored,
for those who like both, it's a
yeah, yeah.
double dose. Perfect for me.
Exactly. Yeah. So, being anchored is about recognizing that we have this capacity to mentally time travel. The human mind is blessed in its capacity to think in abstract, symbolic ways. So we have a sense of our present moment, but we can also go back and reflect on past experiences, which is incredibly helpful for us learning so that we can maybe do things potentially better the next time. But that can bring with it some issues because we can remember, we can also ruminate over things that didn't go as well. And we can also recall traumatic episodes from our histories. So that means that we can, if you like, get dragged back into the past. Our awareness can get co-opted without our consent sometimes to be dragged back into those past memories, intrusive, difficult memories. But we also have this capacity to be zipped into the future. So that's useful and helpful so that we can plan and prepare. And we can purposefully use the present moment to think about, well, how am I going to work towards the achievement of that goal, which is great. But that brings with it problems as well, because we can also generate catastrophic thoughts about what might go wrong in the future. And that's worry. Worry is future oriented in that way. And the science is quite clear that about 49% of the time, 49%, so nearly half the time during our waking hours, we aren't actually thinking about what is happening around us. We're either thinking about the past or the future. That's a lot of experience that we're missing out on. So being anchored is about helping people to be here now, literally, be in this time, this place, so that you can savor the richness of what the present moment and the opportunities that it affords brings. And that's where mindfulness can be incredibly helpful as a way of developing awareness and also some insight around our lived experience of the present moment. And I like to think about a mindful disposition being a bit like a compass needle coming to a bearing. It's an orientation, it's how we are in this moment. But compasses need the bearings on the compass as well for us to think about, okay, in this present moment, which choices do I want to make now? Right? So I like to think about values as being like the bearings on that compass. They help guide us in the decisions and the choices that we might want to make. And I like to think about values as being adverbs. So in English, adverbs tend to end in ly. So you
Mm.
can do something compassionately, assertively, decisively. Okay. So
Mm.
I like that way of thinking about values because it brings them much more into the present moment. Because that's literally how you and I can interact now compassionately with each other,
Mm.
assertively potentially if time's getting a bit tight, right? So there's something about being clear on what our values are so they can influence how we are in this moment, the qualities that we're bringing through and how we choose to behave.
I recently spoke with Jenna Lejeune
Yeah.
about values. She has that metaphor of the truffle dog or something for values. And what do you, how do you help people really identify the values that the LY words that are really sort of important to them? Although I guess it depends on context too, and
Yeah.
that's the importance of the here and now or the present moment and the choices and the values and so on. But yeah, what are some of the ways that people would discover what their
Yeah.
values really are?
Stan, it also depends on the roles, which speaks to your point about context. So I would do a lot of work with high performance athletes, rugby players, footballers, track athletes, and that's a real passion of mine. And we often separate out the values that they might have to foreground as a competitor versus off the track or off the pitch as a person. And that's quite important because the values that they bring to the fore in a competitive environment can be markedly different to the values that are going to be important for them when they're in the kitchen or in the living room back home, interacting with loved ones or on the school run and dropping the kids off, right? That's quite a different scenario to trying to score a try in the last minute of a game. And so separating out roles and then exploring values can be really important. An exercise that I often use, which is really widely used in the ACT world, acceptance and commitment therapy, is the birthday exercise.
Mhm.
So encouraging someone to think about one of those significant birthdays that end in a zero. And it needs to be in the future, right? So it's not so immediate. There's time, if you like, between now and that birthday. So it's an imagery exercise. I encourage the person to imagine a venue that they're very comfortable in, restaurant, could be a hotel, a venue that they've been to and they've enjoyed. And people are gathered, friends, family, work colleagues, team members. And it's come to that point in the night where someone's stepping forward with a microphone to say a few words about who you are, how you are in the world, the difference that you bring. And it's someone you trust, right? You're glad it's them. And they start speaking. What would you hope that that person would say about who you are, about how you are in the world with yourself, with other people? So that can be a nice way in, right? That's
Mm.
the qualities piece that I mentioned. That's the kind of adverbs, and that can help explore values. Another technique, though, is a card sort exercise. So I have a deck of cards with 40 different values on them, and I ask people to sort them into three piles. Not important to how I want to live my life. Well, maybe important and absolutely nailed on. Yeah, this stuff matters to me. So at the end of that card sort process, I just say, well, can we set aside the ones that aren't important or maybe important just for the focus of our conversation now? And we spread those cards out. And I then ask them, oh, are any of those cards there because other people might be influencing you to prioritize those values? Like sometimes people might say, yeah, these three or four. I can see that that was something that was really drilled into me during my schooling, or perhaps they attended church and that was very much influencing their perspective. And values need to be freely chosen by the person as opposed to being something that they feel they ought to prioritize. So we maybe set those aside. I then ask, are there any of those values that you've identified as being really important that you feel quite distant from at the moment, that you're maybe not getting as much opportunity to engage with? And it's just a beautiful conversation to then explore, well, are there ways that we can help find to reconnect with that value? So there are loads of different techniques. And finally, Stan, the other piece is that as soon as somebody starts talking to me about something that they're upset about or distressed by, for me, straight away, that's a window of opportunity to understand, well, what's important enough for that person to be feeling that upset and that discomfort and that distress? What is it that sits on the other side of that that might be of value, might be important? So they're two sides of the one coin. They're inextricably linked. That if we didn't value something, then we wouldn't worry about it. So if we're worried about something, then there's something close by that matters to us. So I can use that to generate some thoughts and hypotheses that I can share with the client. Oh, it sounds like this argument with your partner has really upset you. Yeah, I guess that's maybe an indication of how much you might value the relationship and your role within the relationship. Is that right? So you can
Mm.
try that out just to get a better understanding,
Mm.
of doing things collaboratively in the relationship, and that's maybe where the breakdown has happened, and that's where the upset is coming.
It's great to have the sort of the different ways in, I suppose. The first exercise, the birthday exercise, helps people just to connect with their own sense of it and putting it into words via this idea of someone, describing them in the future and who they've been. The second one offers them a bunch of words or sort of a vocabulary to consider and then sort and that's a really great way to get the thinking processes started. And then the third example is just as a therapist listening well, such that when you're hearing maybe even just really difficult times like trouble in a relationship, that you can start to help offer little ideas about what the values behind all that might be. In chapter 4, you discuss willingness, and I was talking to Robin Wasler recently about working via ACT with trauma, and she talked about willingness too, and sort of opening up to discomfort, maybe rather than fighting it. And just give us a sense of that piece then, that next piece in the OR acronym, the
Mhm.
willingness side.
Yeah, willingness really relates to the willingness to recognize that our minds can be story generating machines and a willingness to show up to the emotions that come with those stories. And we are subject to a lot of media these days. And I like to think about our minds almost being like a media outlet or a news broadcaster. So if we think about BBC or CNN or Fox News, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Um, so they will have their editorial policies on what stories get broadcast. Some will try to be a bit more objective than others. Some will have a political leaning, if you like, right? And our minds are similar in the sense that they are subject to bias. Okay, they're not necessarily objective arbitrators of our lived experience. There will be bias in the stories that our mind generates. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful for people using that analogy, that metaphor to
Mm,
recognize that, well, we have to be discerning digesters of what it is, the stories that are bubbling up, see the story rather than getting swept away by the story. And I even use what I call the roving reporter exercise.
mm,
So you could imagine that you're a reporter on the scene of your thought, standing with your microphone to your mouth, looking into camera. It's now 9:40 a.m. in the morning. I'm recognizing that I'm getting a rumble in my tummy. I might need to get a cup of coffee and a biscuit after this podcast. Back to you in the studio. Now, that's a very
oh,
trivial example, but it's kind of shifting the relationship we have with the stories our mind generates. Now, like reporters, the reporters have to report the story. They don't get caught up in the story. That doesn't fly too well, right? They need to report the news rather than be the news. Likewise, reporters need to be able to let go of the story that they've been reporting so that they can also move on to the next story. If I was pitching up at all of these different locations on different days in different contexts, saying the same thing to camera, that wouldn't really work too well. I wouldn't be in the job very long. And I think that captures the ability to let go of some of the stories and not saying that's easy, but using little techniques like this can help us to just hold some of those stories lightly. And yeah, willing then to show up to the emotions that come with them, because often we're taught that we need to suppress emotions, that they're an inconvenience, that they're an indulgence, that they should be controlled, that they should be mastered. Oh, every time I hear that phrase, master your emotions. Do you know? It's kind of like, hey, you can out tough your emotions. And that concerns me because emotions serve important functions. And if you're too busy trying to master it or fight it, you're not necessarily getting to the message that might sit at the core of it. So willingness is another way.
Mm. Yes, the willingness and the reporter metaphor, the reporter, I guess, is the objective observer of things, and
Yep.
there are also other things going on in that scene. For example, the eyewitness who's the sort of the reporter's interviewing, I suppose, and the eyewitness has a very different experience of that moment and is caught up in it, and it's very personal for them, and so on and so forth. And there's parts of the mind that feel a bit like that as well, maybe. And so trying to step into that observing, objective, neutral, sort of discerning, caring
Yep.
reporter
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah. Getting to the storied nature of
Yes.
our thoughts. And too often we get caught up that the thought is a fact, and
Mm.
that can feel very heavy and that can weigh us down. So getting back to recognizing and noticing the story and observing it, as you say, is helpful.
Your chapter on empowerment then highlights, I guess, action guided by the values, perhaps, or in the moment, rather than some of these stories. Really, I guess is
Hmm.
perhaps how I might interpret how you're describing it. Um, so, so what's this bit? How does empowerment differ from the high performance or even perfectionistic or unrelenting push? That
Hmm.
so many people find themselves in, or even just kind of get used to.
Yeah, the empowerment element, in addition to bringing through some of that work on values, is also about purpose. And I define purpose as engaging in something that is at once meaningful to yourself and has implications for others beyond yourself. So purpose is meaningful to you and of consequence to those beyond you. And there's a lot of focus, if you like, on find your purpose, find your why.
Mm.
And that I think can lead to a lot of frustration. People can be left thinking, well, why can't I find my why? Why can't I find my purpose? It's almost like you walk out the front door and trip over something, and oh, there's my
There's my
purpose.
purpose.
Yeah, waiting to be discovered. And there it
Mm.
is, complete and ready to rock. I'll just pick it up and go. And for me, it's not about finding your purpose, it's forming your purpose. And I talk about this in the book. Forming is this idea that actually the seeds of our purpose are there in the things that light us up, that bring vitality, excitement, enthusiasm. And when we feel that, I think we need to cultivate that. We need to recognize that we have to invest in that and grow it. And so purpose for me, I think, is a key element of being empowered. And your question about, well, yeah. Okay, you've got a sense of purpose, you've got your personal values, you know how you want to be in the world, and how do you almost take care of yourself and protect yourself from going hell for leather and burning out and everything else falling by the wayside in pursuit of growing this purpose or being true to your personal values. And I almost think about values as being like racehorses can wear blinkers, right? And the blinkers are about helping keep the racehorse's eyes focused on the finish line, if you like, keeping them looking ahead. And there's a risk sometimes with our values that we can get our values blinkers on and we start to think, I have to behave in line with these values all of the time. And if I don't, then I'm a bad person. And that's where that kind of sense of shame can come in. I'm doing a bad thing if I'm not being true to my sense of purpose all of the time. And yeah, I like to say to clients, yeah, those blinkers can be helpful in context. They can help racehorses do the race, but you wouldn't want the racehorse wearing those blinkers in the stable,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
It would be banging its head off walls and not able to see its food or where its drink is. So you need to take those blinkers off and you need to take care of yourself so that you can go again. And I like this concept of workability. Is it going to be workable for us to just be relentlessly relentless about being true to our sense of purpose and our personal values? There will absolutely be a time and a place for that, but we also need to take care of ourselves too. And that really is where the second part of the book focuses on this idea of the get, threat, and reset motivational
Mm.
modes and trying to blend our activity across those three modes. So get is
Mm.
about striving. The threat is about surviving, and the reset mode is about reviving. And in modern life, arguably, our get and threat are highly activated. We're really focused on trying to strive to achieve, and we're in get mode. And then if we risk falling short of that, we can easily flip into threat mode and our reset mode can be the poor relative. So the book really does focus on the importance of helping people to get more into reset mode. And that's
Mm.
where things like compassion, gratitude, and also wonder as experiences can be really helpful.
Mm. Yeah. Yes, I sort of feel like I might recognize get, threat, and reset in a sort of a lot of the viewers and listeners of this compassion in a t-shirt will know about threat, drive, and soothing, I suppose, the
Yep.
Paul Gilbert version of it. But you've
And
described.
can I say I very much borrowed that framework. So that is precisely what that has been built on. And I'm grateful to Paul, and I do acknowledge Paul in the book for that foundational work that really helped me to bring that work into the book. So it's beautiful. I think it's so important.
Yeah, and you have a nice turn of phrase, I think, in the book. Like you've worked hard, I think, to word things in ways that help people to, well, both understand but also remember them, and things like the anchoring, the willingness and the empowerment and kind of like moving towards awe, I suppose, is the idea there, being able to be in the present moment, in the here and now, and kind of understanding one's values, to bring awareness to the stories that we might tell ourselves, and then kind of be with the thoughts and feelings that are there, forming purpose and trying to take action around purpose and so on, and then this get, threat, and reset. But just being aware that, as Paul says, we have tricky brains or whatever, and so I think for when we're in that really maladaptive perfectionistic thing and there's shame-based self-criticism at play and we're kind of sort of over preparing or we're procrastinating, all those different things that can happen, it's often somewhere in the get and the threat, isn't it? There's sort of something there, a threat-based drive that kind of is behind a lot of that. And tell us about the reset piece a little bit more then. How do you
Yeah, great.
really present that?
Yeah, and again, now the tree metaphor comes back in, and it's the functioning of a tree. Now, if you think about a tree in spring and summer, they're really active. They're photosynthesizing, they're going after the sun's energy, they're full bloom, they're growing, they're developing. So, trees, they're striving, they have their get mode in spring and summer. Trees also have their threat modes. They need to respond to dangers that they encounter. And infestation from bugs or fungi can kill a tree. So they need to invest energy in protecting themselves. And they do that, for example, through the sap. And there can be a pesticide element within the sap that can protect the tree. So trees have their threat mode, which is about surviving. Trees also, though, have reset mode in autumn and in winter. So in the northern hemisphere, the trees are bare here, and the sun's energy isn't strong enough for them to photosynthesize. So they drop their leaves. Indeed, if they were to hold on to their leaves in the winter, snow could gather on those leaves and break the branches. So it's also functional for the leaves to drop. So trees go dormant in winter and in autumn, and that's an opportunity for reviving. That's the reset mode for the tree. If I was to take an oak tree sapling, a young oak tree, indoors, it would not thrive. It would die because it wouldn't get the environmental signals it needs to shut down, to go into reset. So the moral of that story is, well, if you're always on that get and threat, it's not going to be conducive for thriving in the long term. So again, I think the tree metaphor is helpful in that way. And in the book, I talk about there being two main types of reset. One are momentary moves, and then the other are bold moves. And as their name suggests, momentary moves are more transient, faster, quicker reset opportunities that you can engage and use that can bring about a shift and get you into that reset mode relatively quickly. And those momentary moves are about using self-transcendent emotions, and there are three of them. Wonder, connecting with something more vast than ourselves, and nature can be great for that. Gratitude, about expressing thanks to someone or something other than yourself that you have reason to be grateful for. And then compassion, compassion towards others, but also self-compassion. So those are the momentary moves. Bold moves are longer term commitments, potentially counterintuitive actions and decisions and choices we might make. So an example of a bold move for a reset might be taking a career break or committing to a period of travel or deciding to leave a role or indeed to start a new endeavor, a new initiative. So those are the bold moves, if you like, that help us to realign with our sense of purpose so that we can go again. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview about the reset mode.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's sort of it almost feels a little bit like compassion and to I guess self-compassion is somewhat behind all of it,
Yeah,
because it takes a lot of wisdom and strength and courage and care and to actually bring psychological flexibility into one's life. And as you say, some of the momentary and bold moves that one might make really, they take a lot of wherewithal and that courage piece and so on to do the things. It's that classic self-compassion isn't necessarily always going to feel good. It's about trying to work towards doing things that are good for us, in a sense. You've
yes.
started to speak certainly online. I've noticed you talking about the pressures men face, I guess, around performance and achievement and emotional constraints, I guess, that can sometimes feel imposed. How do ideas like psychological flexibility and self-compassion, how do they land with men and how do they sort of help men, kind of move beyond some of the social pressures, the norms of masculinity and so on that can often inhibit really men.
Yeah, I think for men, self-compassion can be particularly difficult. And there's a bit of a chain of associations that you can almost spot, that compassion equals soft, soft equals weakness, weakness equals failure. These are the kinds of lines of association that have built up in our language that can make men wary and reluctant, and indeed women reluctant to perhaps engage with self-compassion. So, yeah, there's work that needs to be done around well, self-compassion is not weak. It's not passive. It's not giving in. It's not self-indulgent. Um, Self-compassion isn't the absence of strength. It is strength turned inwards towards oneself.
Mm,
So I think helping people to understand that. So self-compassion is not the absence of strength. It is strength turned inwards towards oneself.
mm,
And it's this active, courageous willingness to take care of yourself so you can take care of others or take care of business. And once people start to understand it as an investment in themselves, then they can, I think, get much more on board with it. Um, but yeah, we are swimming against a tide of socialization around, you know, don't be soft, don't be weak, um, dry your eyes. Do you know that kind of messaging
mm,
that many of us grew up with? So yeah, it's important really to help bring around that shift and understanding about what self-compassion is.
mm. Yes, a colleague of mine here, Hayley Quinn, who will be interviewing soon, her tagline is "When you thrive, your business will too," sort of thing. And I
Yeah,
suppose that's the little connection there that we're trying to convey is that self-compassion is a strength and helps you to actually improve on performance and
yeah,
it's a motivator and it helps with kind of really being able to identify what it is you want to do and how to do it and whether you will do it and commit to it and so on. So it actually promotes kind of thriving and flourishing, even
yeah.
in our business or our sport or whatever it might be.
And very quickly, psychological flexibility in terms of trying to help people understand it and see the value of it. People understand the benefits of physical flexibility, right?
Hmm.
Being malleable to prevent injury or promote rehab, to stay fit and well. And psychological flexibility is a very much analogous experience, but it's about, well, being malleable, being flexible in relation to our thoughts and our feelings. And I think understanding the value of physical flexibility helps then be a bridge to how people can then get on board with, okay, yeah, psychological flexibility.
Mm,
I get the idea here and I can
mm.
see it might be important.
And that's why it's such a beautiful metaphor that is the title of your book and also the theme that runs through it. The tree that bends. The tree that bends is able to, withstand the winds and the storms around it. And just as psychological flexibility helps us to, kind of cope with life's challenges, the inevitable challenges that will be there, and bringing that self-compassion in. I guess that sort of helps to fertilize the roots and, kind
Mhm.
of whatever it is. I'm trying to think of how to expand that metaphor quickly
Love
because I
it.
know you need to go. And so, but I really appreciate that and all that conversation and I appreciate you coming and speaking with me. I recommend everyone check you out on, I think it's Instagram mainly. I'm not sure if there are other things
Yeah,
you are on as well, but your
yeah.
social media is very helpful and entertaining.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm at Ross G. White on Instagram, and people can follow me as well on LinkedIn. So yeah, if you search for me around Strive to Thrive, the name of my psychology consultancy, that should help people find me.
I'll have all that in the description. So,
Great.
Professor Ross White, thank you very much for speaking with me on Compassion in a T-shirt.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.